We're now going to move on to our third speaker, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of you in the audience watching are, like me, very excited to hear Rebecca Slayman talking next. And let me just try to find. Oh, I messed up. Rebecca, sorry, I forgot to paste your biography into my
That's okay.
into
I
my
can do it
file.
myself if you need.
Well, I'm just going to say that I met Rebecca on Twitter, where she is a relatively new Dylan fan, but already a strong presence in the fan community. I think I can speak for all of us who are on Twitter when I say this. And she is a writer and an internet expert, if I remember correctly. And she likes thinking about internet culture and also, I think she's responsible for a renewed popularity of the film Hearts of Fire. Um, so I'm really looking forward to Rebecca's talk. Take it away.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Slayman, and I am not an academic. I am 23 years old, and I am a very relatively new Dylan fan. And although I don't have any academic expertise, I'm not a professor, I'm going to try to make it interesting, and hopefully you'll find some value in what I have to say. My presentation is called Bob Nation, Twitter, Tweens, and Twinks. And I assume a lot of the people watching will not know one or most of the words in that, so I'm going to define a few terms before I get started. Bob Nation is a group chat that I was invited into by an Australian named Lola immediately after my discovery of Bob Twitter, notably Bob Stan Twitter. Stan is also something you need to know. A Stan is something of a super fan, an insular category of mostly teenagers and their Twitter accounts that use a shared language, humor, and form of celebrating the person that they're a fan of. As Laura said, the internet is an equalizing space, and so it's really cool that these fan communities have popped up. A twink is a small, slender, young or young-looking gay man. Now, here's an example of it. Bob Dylan is a twink. Now, if you're saying Bob Dylan's not a gay man, that's fair. We don't think he's a gay man. But a lot of the younger fan community is gay or trans or queer in some way. And so we have found humor in reclaiming Bob for our own. There's not the same sort of academic hierarchy in the younger fan communities, or even most of the classic rock fan communities that existed before the internet, where there's a lot of gatekeeping and hierarchies of who knows what, who has access to what. It's all equalized. And so we find humor and joy in claiming Bob for ourselves, making fun of him, poking at him in a way that I think is really beautiful. And a tween is a 12 to 14-year-old, but I mostly used it for the alliterative factor, though I have come across a couple 13 to 14-year-olds in my experience. Now, my story is a journey through the Bob Dylan fandom, the online fandom, which I think is unique. I didn't grow up with Bob in the air. I wasn't introduced to him by anybody. I just stumbled into it about a year ago, last week. And you might be thinking, Rebecca, how did you get here on a panel at BobCon? And I say, I know, right? But it's because I've seen some stuff, and hopefully I can act as a translator. Like I said, I'm 23 years old, so I am right on the cusp of millennials and Gen Z. And I've always found it fascinating to see how these different groups of people who grew up in this very transformative time behave on the internet. And hopefully I can translate what I've learned to older fans, to baby boomers, and even, Bob Dylan, who's 80. I started my Bob fandom in a medium I think most people are familiar with, and that's YouTube. I wasn't just interested in the music, I was really interested in the personality of Bob and how he was originally received. That's what fascinated me. And my exposure to the fans of those in the YouTube comment section was really interesting to me as well. If you've never read through the comments on Bob videos, you're really missing out. It's a combination of sweet old people who are reminiscing on their lives. They use a lot of ellipses. Boomers, stop doing that. It's really intimidating and kind of ominous. And they often sign their comments like, "Love Steven." And it's like, "Steven, do you think Bob is reading these comments? What are you doing? This is not fan mail." Or they'll date it. So there's those people. Then there's a group of mysterious people who are losing their minds in the comment section, which I also relate to. For example, there's this one comment that I saw that says, "I'm watching something that happened 54 years ago, drunk AF. Life is crazy." And it's like, that's exactly how I feel when I'm watching those videos. So I got to have these interactions with these kind of people I related to. And then also in the YouTube comment section, there are people who say Bob Dylan sold his soul to the devil, which, while I don't relate to it, is very entertaining. So I would read these comments and I would feel like a longing to connect with these kinds of people. YouTube comments aren't really a social media. You can see everything flattened by space and time, but it's like picking up clues on a scavenger hunt. But I longed for the community like I had experienced with everything else I'd ever been a fan of. I would think of jokes and make memes in my brain that I couldn't share with anyone because I figured they'd only be relevant to people 50 years ago, and the sense of humor would only translate to the current internet generation. I grew up on Twitter, so I feel like my brain was unfortunately formed by the kind of language that is used on there, and that's how I interact with things that I'm a fan of. And also, I was kind of wary of who I thought of as Dylan fans, no offense to anyone here. The most you hear about it in pop culture lately, though he's been on a decline because it's been so long since he first became famous, celebrities will sometimes fall into a Bob Dylan era where they'll feel like they're introspective and brooding and dark. And that's not something that matched up with my brain with what Bob was. From those early interviews, you can see he's funny and silly and weird. So I looked for people who I could relate to with Bob in that context. So I don't know what led me to it, but one night I Googled Bob Dylan fan fiction. And what I discovered was a wealth of content that surfaced, and I was beside myself. It didn't totally surprise me that this existed, but it was also the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I spent that night crying with laughter and texting everyone I knew. There were people out there who wanted to boink a 79-year-old man at the time, and they shipped him with Johnny Cash, the Beatles, and one particularly disturbed person created a gay panic fanfiction with Tiny Tim. And this was really, really exciting that there were people that were at least millennials who were interacting with Bob in a way that was more familiar to my fan experience. I found a bunch of them were from like 2013. So once again, I was picking up this breadcrumb trail of finding people like myself. So as I said, Twitter is sort of my home base. I first joined because of my love of the Jonas Brothers, and I can't say how young I was when I joined because it was younger than the Twitter rules allowed, and if they find out, they will delete my account. But over half my life has been spent on this platform. So I eventually decided to look up Bob Dylan, and I found the Big Rock accounts, Bob 41 Dylan, and mostly men over 40. And then I found 2 accounts of girls with profile pictures of Bob Dylan, a marker of the stan community. They had BLM in their profiles, and they had sort of vintage emojis. And I knew that I had found Bob Nation. And since I had built up this wealth of memes and jokes, I just sort of unleashed them the night that I discovered this Twitter. I discovered that there's this generation of fans slightly younger than myself. They're mostly in high school. And I was asked to join this group chat called Bob Nation. It's hard to describe the atmosphere of Bob Nation, but it is chaotic and really passionate. The sense of humor is kind of sarcastic, negging, but also full-blown self-aware camp. This is how it happens where some people who are older, not in the know, will come across one of our accounts and they'll find us saying, Bob Dylan gay. And they'll say, what do you mean? Bob Dylan isn't gay. How dare you? Are you stupid? And rather than argue with them as maybe an older person might, you'll just get about 20 people commenting, no, Bob's gay, underneath it. And it's so enjoyable that these people in this equalized environment are able to reclaim stuff for themselves. And there's this whole world of teenagers who are obsessed with Bob Dylan and don't really care about the rules. And that seems kind of Bob-like, if you ask me. In Bob Nation, I find the filthiest things I've ever seen said about Bob Dylan. You should have seen the day when the Rough and Rowdy Ways reviews dropped and it was revealed that Bob would say cock. They were losing their freaking minds. And these young people are just so funny and entertaining. And I find value in them. And I hope that with my being here, we can open the door for them to be considered part of the Dylan fan community. And these people have not only grown up on the internet like myself, but they have been fully forged in it. And that's how you get this kind of positive trolling and love of Bob on the internet. They are exactly like Bob, and therefore they respect him. They're somewhere in the middle of Bob is always right and he's a god, and Bob's a total asshole. They're right in the middle and they say, like, Bob's an asshole and that's why we love him. They share a sense of humor, a sense of nihilist humor. And while many adults have fallen prey to the superiority of, like, oh, Bob's better than everyone and I like him, therefore I'm better than everyone, they don't think that way at all. Because they're people who are often queer, trans, gay, claiming Bob for their own, they know that the world is against them and they're banding together and just claiming it shamelessly. So I believe that since this generation is so far removed from when Bob was immediately famous in the 60s, they offer a new perspective because they don't have any attachments from the pop culture. They are able to disrupt narratives and break them open to offer something new. And they're far removed as a generation, and it really is a testament to Bob Dylan's worth and success that he is reaching out to even teenagers today. And I think that's beautiful that they can connect through this earnestness, through their passion, and through their cutting humor. The end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was fantastic. And such a lovely way to kind of bring the ideas that we want to talk about in this panel together, and to also introduce, fandom and talk about, what it means to be a Bob Dylan fan when you're, a teenager in 2021. And I loved it. Thank you so much. Just very quickly, the first question I want to ask is, Rebecca, what's on your shirt?
My shirt is available on definitelydylan.com. It says, "This is what a Bob Dylan fan looks like." And I'm so happy and proud to be wearing it. Thank you, Laura.
Well, thank you so much for wearing it. I feel very honored. But yeah, I can't wait to have a bit of a conversation and to connect these three papers in some ways. I have a few questions. I'm sure maybe you also have questions for one another. And as a reminder, all of you listening and watching can also submit your questions in the chat. I'm going to ask a question from Anne Margaret Daniel and kind of tag my own question kind of along with it. Because Anne Margaret Daniel is asking, surely Timothée Chalamet playing Bob in a new documentary or mock doc will gain him even more young fans. Do you think that even the announcement of Chalamet's forthcoming movie upped the number of Stan accounts you saw? And I'm just going to add to it. I would love for you to also riff a little bit on it. What do you think that teenagers really love about Bob Dylan? Like, what is it that you think attracts them to him?
Yeah. As far as Timothée Chalamet, there's been an interesting response with the people who are already fans of Bob Dylan in that they're like, oh no, this is going to make him popular among our age group, and we don't like that. We want to stay like special, like this is our person that we love. But I met some teenagers recently who did not even know who Bob Dylan was, but then I told them that Timothy Chalamet would be playing him in a movie upcoming. They were like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I think once that movie comes out, there will be a huge influx into the Twitter community of teenagers. And as far as why do teenagers like him? Because he was like the coolest teenager ever. I mean, one thing about all this, not just Bob Dylan, there's also like a classic rock teenage stan community. I think it depends on how much is accessible online, and they can feel like they can relate to these stars from the 60s as much as people today, because everything is through the internet. You can watch the YouTube videos of interviews, you can watch videos of concerts, stuff like that. He's easily offended. He's hates authority, is always angry. That's the perfect teenage mood. And of course, these are people who, like myself, like I was an English major. I love literature, and it's something that's really touching when you have this like really sensitive, introspective music with this really like fuck it attitude. I think that's why teenagers really love him.
I think that's really an interesting take on it. One of them is definitely a loaded one that I'd love to
Is it the
talk
one
about.
from Daniel? Because
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to dissect it as well. It's very wordy.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not sure about the specific question what the answer is, but he's basically asking about how if the teenagers who like seem pretty prone to canceling people when they do things that are not good to do. And I would say I did a paper on the whole vintage classic rock stan community and the way that they approach discussions of whether people can be redeemed for their actions in the past are really, really good. They're able to reckon with the fact that things took place in the past. They took place in a different time, in a different context, but they also still have like a really good set of morals on their head. So I think that this specific community are not like teenagers their age either, because they have context. They have a sense of loving these people from a different time. And so they have learned to navigate the different social mores. Although I will say that their things today aren't so great online because there are older people who are in the direct messages of minors hitting on them in this community. And that needs to be addressed, and people need to not do that. Please stop DMing teenagers about their looks. Stop tweeting any women about their looks, especially if you see them as, someone who is attractive because they like Bob Dylan. We are people too, and we would like to be treated with respect, which is something Laura and I have talked about before. We really don't want to be hit on anymore online. It's creepy and it's weird and it's demoralizing.
Thank you so much for saying that. Preach. It's yeah, and I'm also going to say one more thing about Dana Gillespie, because Clinton Halen writes about that in the latest book, and there he writes that she was just 15 when Dylan came over to London, which would have made her underage. But this was kind of like troubling for me, so I looked it up, and she was actually 16, which means she was over the age of consent. Would have been very easy to look up on Google. I did it, but if we have like a moment, one thing that I would really love to hear from you, if you could keep it very short, I would love to hear from all of you a very quick answer to the question, how would you like to see the world of Dylan incorporate some of the things that you care about in the future, be it like, for example, in the Bob Dylan Center, in an exhibition or something. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this from your area of expertise.
I would say elevating more speakers like myself who are outside of the academic world, and just having some fun with it, because Bob is a fun guy and he doesn't make any sense, and we need to embrace that.
What a wonderful note to end this panel on. Thank you so much to all three of you. And thank you so much to everyone watching. And again, what a wonderful way to spend Bob Dylan's birthday with all of you. And I'm sure we could talk for another couple of hours, but unfortunately we're out of time.